Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us. I'm Carol Oldham. I'm the Executive Director of the Massachusetts Climate Action Network. And joining me today, we have Josh Kraft from the Environmental League of Massachusetts.
Hello.
Emily Rochon from Boston Community Capital, and Drew Grande from the Sierra Club. Thanks so much for joining us, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Carol.
So we're here to talk about clean energy and climate change, and where we are in Massachusetts as a state and where we want to go and how we can get there. So I just wanted to see if folks wanted to set the context in terms of why clean energy matters and why it's a good idea.
Great. Well, I can take a start at that. I think, as a lot of us know, there are a lot of reasons why renewable energy is better than dirty energy. Fossil fuels have a lot of externalities like pollution and create asthma and lots of harm in mining communities. And, clean energy basically avoids a lot of those things. Solar, for example, is a zero emission source of energy. Put it on your rooftop, you put it in a field, you plug it in, and the power it produces is emission free. And so, it's definitely a preferable alternative to a lot of the energy sources we're relying on today. And in addition to the public health benefits, I think, there's a range of climate change benefits and maybe some other benefits that Drew or Josh would like to highlight.
Yeah, and I think Emily provides a great context for the environmental benefits, but in New England, in Massachusetts, we're in a region that doesn't have indigenous sources of fossil fuels or supplies that we can rely upon. And over the last decade or so, we've done a really good job of shifting away from relying on out-of-state, large-scale fossil fuel resources and shifting that with the Global Warming Solutions Act and the Green Communities Act to relying on efficiency and then more local renewable energy resources. There was a study that was done recently that we spend about $22 billion a year on energy expenditures, and 80% of that flows out of state. And we're doing a pretty good job of reversing that, but we need to continue that momentum, particularly before we import new sources of energy from out of this region.
The $22 billion in energy, it's important to remember that's just the energy cost right there. From the former sources that we've been getting our energy from, our electricity from, 4 years ago, we had 3 active coal plants in the state: Salem Harbor, Brayton Point, and Mount Tom out in Holyoke. Working with families in Holyoke the last several years with organizations like Neighbor to Neighbor, Nueces Raíces, Toxic Action Center, we've had a lot of interaction with the residents and families that live out there. And oftentimes the first thing when we start talking with someone is they moved to Holyoke from Puerto Rico. They were healthy. They'd been living there for a couple of weeks. They started getting a nagging cough. They wanted to see what it was. They thought maybe it was allergies. They go to the doctor. They're diagnosed with asthma. And that right there gives them an extra financial burden that they're now stuck with. We've talked with numerous families that several children have asthma. They're on asthma medication that runs $100 a month per child, per family. And that goes every month, and that's on top of the hospitalizations, the asthma attacks, the missed school, the missed work, which just builds into this cycle of extra costs and sending them farther back and making it harder for them to advance.
And of course, one of the reasons that the Massachusetts Climate Action Network cares about clean energy is that broader context of, climate change is the largest threat that humanity is facing right now, and actually wildlife as well. And the only way that we're going to tackle is to move towards cleaner sources and to move away from these dirty old polluting fossil fuels. So we're 100% on board with that.
Right, and I think the direction that we need to head in Massachusetts that's clear from both a science of climate change perspective, but also from the economic development perspective, is 100% renewables by 2050. That's really the only way you get to the emission reduction levels that are needed to avoid catastrophic climate change. But the good news is, of course, there's a whole host of other economic jobs, healthy community benefits associated with that transition. And so the money that we will be spending is going to do much more than protect the climate, but also make sure that everybody in Massachusetts has a healthier future.
Absolutely, and I think I've seen really interesting infographics about how we can get to 100% by 2050, and I thought that was incredibly compelling because it feels very difficult. It feels very far away. It feels like, we don't have that much sun. We don't have, that many, like you were saying, native energy resources here. But to look at this sort of breakdown in terms of, I think it was 22% solar
Right.
and, a big chunk of offshore wind. I think it's like 50% or a little bit over 50%. It starts to become a reality, and you start thinking about, okay, well then, if that's the picture, then how do we get from where we are to where we need to be?
Right.
And so let's talk about actually where we are right now. So we have obviously a lot more renewable energy happening in the state than we did even just a few years ago. Yeah. Things are cranking along. We've got how many thousands of solar and wind jobs that are already happening here in Massachusetts?
We have 12,000 solar jobs in Massachusetts, making us the second largest solar employer in the nation,
Wow.
only behind California.
And we're top in the nation for energy efficiency and have been for several years.
That's right. And it's really exciting that under our energy efficiency programs, we managed to not only stop growing the amount of electricity we use while our economy grows, but we've managed to start seeing that load of electricity start to go down. And we think, even though Massachusetts is a leader, we should keep in mind that we're sort of at the horizon, that there's still a way to go to reduce the amount of energy waste that we have
Right.
and reducing our emissions. We're only scratching the surface.
Right. And particularly with energy efficiency, because so many of our buildings are older and
Right.
so many of our industries are older, and so we have a lot that we can still do.
Yeah, and again, the right now, I think folks who are involved in MCAN should know that there's a 3-year energy efficiency plan that's on the table that utilities run in many of our communities across the state. And to date, we haven't seen any negative rate impacts from the fact that we've invested heavily in efficiency, and we just need to keep hammering on that nail and keep reducing the amount of load that we use. And we're seeing a little bit of backsliding there, and so it's very important to keep an eye on that and ensure that our electric distribution companies know that you all in your communities support the kind of investments in efficiency and in solar that Emily's been talking about.
And by electric distribution companies, we're talking about the utilities, right?
Utilities, that's right.
Just
that's
making
right.
sure.
Both electric and gas.
Yep.
And
Yep.
Josh, I've heard that for every dollar Massachusetts spend on energy efficiency, we get at least $3 worth of savings. Is that true?
Yes, and I've heard actually upwards of $5 in benefits
Wow.
for every, if you look at both the economic benefits, which are more in the $3 range, but then also the public health and climate benefits that are related. So again, up 6 years into the programs, we're still seeing lots of room to improve on that energy waste and reach more homes, more businesses. And again, I think it's wonderful that it's something that people can do in their homes, in their communities. You can take that effort and even if you've had an energy audit or had some work done, and keep doing that, but also remind your state officials that there's a commitment to make sure that structure remains in place, that you have that opportunity rather than relying on another set of large power plants that are not in your community and probably overall have it's not going to be clean energy. It's not going to be the stuff that gets us to our goals in terms of climate.
Yeah. Yeah. And Drew, you've been working a lot on offshore wind. So where are we
Very exciting
in terms
news
of
in
that?
offshore wind.
Yeah.
Just announced 2 weeks ago now, we've seen the groundbreaking on offshore wind, more of a construction kickoff, I should say, when we're talking about building out in the water. But Deepwater Wind is starting the construction phase of the Block Island Wind Farm project, which is a 30-megawatt, 5-turbine project 3 miles off the coast of Block Island, which is just off of Rhode Island. Block Island's about 12 miles out to sea, so 3 miles beyond that. They are huge machines that are going to be out there in the ocean that are going to be supplying energy to Block Island, which right now receives all of their energy from diesel generators on the island.
Oh.
They burn 1 million gallons of diesel each year. Those diesel generators get the diesel by putting tankers onto ferries that go out into Block Island Sound, supply the island with diesel generators. And if you're ever out on the island and you find where they are, they're not too hard because they are incredibly loud generators. Oh. They sound like a field of Mack trucks just rumbling away. They're not quiet machines by any means, and they're also not clean by any means either. So there is a haze. You're out in the middle of the ocean, and there's a haze problem out there. So we're going to immediately see air cleaning up in Block Island. We're going to see the electric rates in Block Island decrease by 40%. So right now, Block Island residents pay about 55 cents a kilowatt hour. There'll be a 40% decrease in energy. And there are also going to be, for the first time, Block Island is going to be connected to the rest of America through an undersea cable. So the excess energy from those wind turbines will pass from Block Island back to Rhode Island, and Rhode Island is going to be, all of Rhode Island is going to be able to have the benefit of offshore wind.
That's great.
And on the economic side, we're looking at, with this Block Island wind farm project, the creation of 300 new jobs. So those 300 new clean energy jobs that will not be able to be shipped out overseas or outsourced to someplace else.
And I know we had hoped originally that those would be in Massachusetts and that we would have, that we would be sort of the first in the nation to be able to have those turbines heading into the water, but it looks like Rhode Island's going to beat us, so
Yep.
we can be close behind.
Rhode Island's going to win. So the construction phase is this summer in July. The foundations are going in the water, so that'll take place from July up till September. And then same time frame next year, the actual turbines will be going in. And then fall of 2016 is when they will turn those on and start supplying power. Now you talk about Massachusetts offshore wind. There's still the potential out there. So Massachusetts won't be first, but there's still a lot of potential out there. 9,000 megawatts of clean offshore wind power are out there ready for Massachusetts and the rest of New England to take advantage of.
And is that in those offshore wind leases that the federal government is putting together?
Yep, those are the first offshore wind leases. Deepwater Wind has one of those leases, the same people who are building the Block Island project. Offshore MW is working with Martha's Vineyard on another one. They're going to have a small piece of that one. And Dong Energy is a holder of the third lease.
They're a Danish company, right?
Yep, Danish company.
Okay.
Great.
So we have one of the largest offshore wind developers in the world interested and ready to take advantage of the Massachusetts offshore wind market, and a tremendous opportunity with that to develop an industry here.
Yeah.
But again, 10 times at least the size of what was available at Cape Wind, much further offshore, and
Without those visibility problems.
without those visibility problems. And again, part of seeing the opportunities that we have a lot of energy, dirty energy that's about to retire and come offline. And of course, there's a lot of hesitation and concern about how we're going to meet our needs reliably. But we have resources here in whether it's offshore wind, whether it's our solar resources, and then whether there's a lot of at least 3,000 megawatts and probably more in upper New England that with the right mixture of policies we could bring here. And so I think as we consider how we keep New England thriving and deal with the fact that we have a lot of turnover in our generation fleet, that we have this great opportunity. Again, good for the climate, good for our economy, and good for our air.
And Josh, I keep thinking back to that $22 billion number that you put out there earlier. That's $22 billion that we can reinvest back into New England.
That's right.
Well, along those lines, solar in Massachusetts between 2010 and 2014 resulted in $2.37 billion of investment in the state. And so our energy dollars are definitely staying here more when you're investing in renewables. And on the solar front, the industry is booming to some extent. I think maybe we'll talk a little bit later what's going on slowing down solar, but we have 841 megawatts of solar in Massachusetts. It's enough to power 128,000 homes, and it's about 2% of our electricity. We're doing an excellent job. We've got the fourth most installed solar capacity in the nation, which is pretty significant given we're not, a sunny California or Arizona. But to give us some perspective, I think it's important to look, to our European neighbors and see where they're at. Belgium, for example, it's about the same size as Massachusetts, same number of people. They get less sun than us, but they have 5 gigawatts of solar. So they have more than 5 times as much solar as Massachusetts. So we can definitely be doing more than we're doing now.
And can you tell us, I know that the company that you work for does a lot of solar financing. Can you tell us about some of the interesting projects that you've seen while you've been working there?
Absolutely. So I work for Boston Community Capital. They're a community development finance institution. It's been around for about 30 years now. They manage over $1 billion worth of assets, which is pretty incredible. But their mission is to build healthy communities where low-income people live and work. And one way they do that is by developing solar projects in affordable housing settings to make sure that prices are stabilized and that budgets, operating budgets are not in jeopardy because electricity prices double over the winter or something like that. Solar is a great solution for those sorts of things. And so we do projects all over Massachusetts. We have about 4 megawatts in total. But which is now less than 0.5% of what's in the state. But for example, we have solar panels on the roof of the Greater Boston Food Bank. You can't see them if you're driving by on the highway N93, but they're all there. We've basically plastered their roof with as much solar as we can get up there. And it's saving the organizations, about $20,000 a year. And every dollar the organization saves, I think it's about 2.36 meals extra that they can provide to the communities in need.
For every dollar?
Yeah, for every dollar
Wow.
saved. And similarly, we have a community solar project in Gardner, Massachusetts that we built along with the Gardner Redevelopment Authority and Mayor Mark Hawk out there was a great supporter. And we are sharing the net metering credits generated by that project with 4 local organizations, including an affordable housing development and an organization that works with the disabled community that otherwise couldn't put solar on their roof. And again, we're saving them at least $10,000 a year. So solar is a huge solution for low-income communities, and we're out there in the market trying to develop those kinds of projects to demonstrate that solar benefits everybody, even if it's not on your rooftop. But particularly if you're able to access solar directly, then you're going to get a whole host of benefits.
Right. And I know I was, so the way that MCAN is structured for the audience out there, we have town level chapters, and I was at the Sustainable Winchester meeting. That's one of our chapters, and they're putting solar on their schools, and they did a back of the envelope calculation during the meeting and figured it's going to save their schools something like $500,000 in the short run. So it does save an awful lot of money. And I think you told me a story about Greenfield being able to actually not have to raise their taxes because they had a solar project.
I mean, that's not a BCC project, but that's one of the many benefits of solar is because it stabilizes and fixes your energy costs. Cities and towns are able to plan more effectively and efficiently, and instead of having to raise property taxes, in some instances they can lower them, or school budgets are more stable. So, kids can get an after-school music program where otherwise they may have had to cut it. That's the benefit of renewable energy. And solar, because it's smaller than wind, really a distributed energy resource, you can put it almost anywhere, and whoever is near the project is basically benefiting from the savings. And so it's a real game changer because in addition to the savings and its ability to keep the lights on, solar, for example, paired with an air source heat pump can keep you warm during the winter. So you're not burning natural gas, you're not relying on oil or something else. And right now, that's the most cost-effective solution in a new build residential setting. Solar and air source heat pump. So it's like a win for the climate and a win for your pocketbook. It really doesn't get much better than that.
And there is actually quite a few megawatts of wind in the state, right? That's not offshore. That's actually onshore.
Just under 200 megawatts of wind across Massachusetts right now. And we have Josh was alluding to, we have even more potential for that in northern Maine, where we're trying to get some of that down here. There's a demand for that through communities that are looking for more wind energy to bring down to their residents and businesses.
That's great. That's great. So let me just ask you folks to set the I guess to explain the setting in terms of how we got where we are. I know that there are a couple pieces of legislation that got us sort of moving on clean energy as a state. And Josh, if you want to just tell us a little bit about that, that would be great.
Yeah. So. Massachusetts, again, when we were at a period not unlike today, when we were experiencing high natural gas prices and greater and greater concern about the impact that we still know that climate change is going to have in our communities, we enacted the Green Communities Act, and along with the Global Warming Solutions Act. But the Green Communities Act was really a requirement that we change our model in terms of how we purchase and prioritize investments in power. And so the first thing we need to do is it calls on our utilities to invest in all energy efficiency resources that are cost effective or cheaper than new supplies. And again, energy efficiency, it's not just a personal virtue, it's a resource that we can rely on, and we've been relying on it for quite some time. The Green Communities Act set the stage for both the solar incentive programs, the SREX program, and at metering, which made people producers and of their own power, and gave you that
And of
option.
their neighbors' power.
And of their neighbors' power, so you could share that power. And then it also was the first time that our renewable portfolio standard, so that we were required to get 15% of our power from Class 1 renewable energy sources. Sorry for the jargon.
Just the really good
The
stuff.
cleanest
Good
of the
stuff.
clean.
Stuff that we
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
What we've been talking about here.
and by 2020. And the great news is, again, that we've seen emissions drop, and we've seen, I think it's by like 11% since 1990, and while our economy continues to boom.
Yeah.
But we have a lot more that we can continue to do and sort of build on that foundation. And we're going to need to do that if we're going to honor our climate commitments in any real way over the next decade.
Right. And Drew, I know that the Renewable Portfolio Standard is something that's really important to the Sierra Club. Do you want to tell us a little bit about where you guys would like to go with that?
Sure. So the Renewable Portfolio Standard, just like Josh said, it tells the utilities that they need to start increasing the amount of clean renewable energy they get each year, that they build into their mix. So whether that's solar or wind, or if they get geothermal from somewhere, that's all part of it. So right now the Renewable Portfolio Standard is set to increase by 1% each year. And that's been in place since 1997. And the great part about this is that we've been able to do that. We haven't had any glitches or road bumps in the way with the utilities said, oh, there's no way we can do this. They've been able to do that. So what we want to do is, in order to start, now that we're on that verge of bringing in the wind from northern New England, start building out the offshore wind. We've seen solar energy really taking off and is continuing to grow. We want to make sure that's happening because it goes back to that $22 billion of energy dollars that are leaving the state. So in order to capture that, bring it back in, we want to see the Renewable Portfolio Standard increase from 1% each year to at least 2% each year, so that we can really start taking advantage of all the pieces that are out there. We've been, as a community, as an environmental community, we've been saying for a long time, we can't be over-reliant on any one energy source. And whether that's coal, nuclear, natural gas, as we've started to move away from some of those and start trying to invest in some of these other things, we want to make sure we're not getting over-reliant in any one source, whether that's solar, offshore wind, or wind. We want to start seeing a mix of those. And that's what the Renewable Portfolio Standard is going to allow us to do, that is make sure that we bring all of those forward and make sure that all of Massachusetts has the opportunity to take advantage of those.
So while we're on the sort of policy focus, can you tell us a little bit, Emily, about the, and actually Josh, you as well, about the, I know that solar, we're sort of reaching this point where things are stalling out a little bit because there's not the same commitment to some of the progressive policies that there have been in the past.
Yeah, solar's hit a pretty big roadblock in Massachusetts, and it's quite problematic. In Massachusetts, we have net metering, which basically is an accounting mechanism that allows you to get credit on your bill for any electricity that you export into the grid. And it's a very important.
So if your solar is making too much electricity, then you can put some of it back in the grid and it basically winds your bill backwards.
Yeah, it's like rollover minutes on your cell phone plan. And so in that way, even if you're not home during the day, you can use the credits at night. And it's a very critically important mechanism to get new solar installations built. 43 states have net metering in some form or another. Massachusetts is not unique. What we are unique in is that we limit how much solar can net meter by what's called a cap, and that's set through statute. And the cap has been hit in National Grid territory. So that means if you're a customer of National Grid and you're looking to build a solar system, you are not eligible for net metering now. It's important to realize that this doesn't apply to smaller residential systems. So if you're a homeowner, that's not a problem. But a lot of the low-income solar projects, community-shared solar projects, municipal projects, those are stalled out unless the legislature raises net metering caps.
Emily,
Yes.
There must be some very important technical engineering reason why there's a cap in place.
No, actually there isn't. There really is no reason to cap net metering. metering. You know, that if the technical issues are dealt with another part of the solar process, you know, called interconnection, that's handled. The engineers come in, they figure out if it's safe, if an upgrade is needed. That's all taken care of. So there's no reason to cap net metering. And right now, because the cap has been hit in National Grid territory, 171 communities, or basically 49% of the state, has less access to solar. And even if you don't care so much about that, there are people losing their jobs, which is quite problematic. You know, there's a real human cost to this sort of start and stop policy of solar here in Massachusetts. So we're asking the legislature to act immediately to raise net metering caps, you know, this year before they go on their summer recess. There's no reason to stop solar from working for Massachusetts over net metering cap issues.
Are you telling me that people are losing their jobs over completely arbitrary policy?
Yes, Drew. I know that's hard to believe. But yeah, there are people like the utilities and others that don't view solar favorably. And so if people lose their jobs as a consequence, they really don't care that much. They can still sleep at night. And
Fascinating.
yeah, well, c'est la vie. I think, you know, it's one of the ways in which anti-renewable energy forces are leveraging policy to slow the success that we've experienced to date. And Massachusetts has been a leader on this and so many other clean energy issues. We really need the legislature to make sure we retain that leadership and that the people that have these solar jobs can keep them.
Yeah, and I would add that the cap on net metered solar, community solar at your homes is an experiment, because we had no idea at the time how popular people generating their own power, a zero emissions, zero cost fuel would be. And now we have, 800 megawatts of solar, you know, come online in a very rapid order of time. I mean, that's
'cause everybody loves it.
That's
it
real
turns
power.
out.
Exactly. And,
Yeah.
and so, you know, the trick for the legislature and for the governor is to keep this momentum going. You know, and there may be some adjustments to the policy structure we have that we can make, but you know, this is a success story. This is not
right.
a.
Let's not get in the way of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, I'd like to just talk a little bit about what folks can do, both on their household level and then also on the community level, to make sure that they're supporting clean energy as much as they possibly can. So who's got some thoughts about that?
Well, I'll just start just saying, really you need to take advantage of the energy efficiency programs if you haven't. And whether it's taking advantage of the fact that you can put LED lighting, high quality, very low energy lighting in your home through our energy efficiency programs, whether you have a big utility or you have a municipal utility, you have programs available to you that you can call and come to your house. And then while you're at it, think about doing a larger job, doing some work to seal up your home, air sealing, insulation, and then, as Emily said, an air source heat pump. It can really add up, and they're really generous incentives, and a heat loan program which provides really zero cost financing, and you know, particularly if you're thinking about solar in your community. And if you're a renter, you can take advantage of the programs. You know, do it now. Yeah,
and community shared solar is a great way for renters to get engaged with those projects. And if you've had an audit, go ahead and get the work done.
Get the work done.
Because there have been an awful lot of people who've had audits who have not actually then taken that next step and gotten their house weatherized and all of that kind of thing.
I can tell you, we did the audit.
Yeah.
Did the audit, followed up on it.
Yeah.
Did the caulking, did the insulation. The next winter, used 1 tank less of oil.
Wow.
It makes a difference.
It's a huge difference.
Yeah, we had our house insulated through Mass Save, and it cut our energy bills in half.
Well, and particularly after this winter, I mean, just walking around neighborhoods, noticing all the ice dams.
Yes.
I was definitely thinking, man, there are a lot of people who are spending a lot of money and staying up at night.
It was surprising to see how many ice dams there were.
Yeah, it was horrifying. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. We really appreciate you taking the time, and we'll continue the conversation next time.
Always a pleasure, Carol.
It's a pleasure, Carol.
Thanks, Carol.